Welcome back to Case Closed, everybody. Today we're going deep, into a case that's been all over the headlines. Wade Stephen Wilson, the Deadpool killer.
Yeah, the Deadpool
It
case.
sounds like ripped from the pages of a comic book, but this story is very real,
It is.
and it's really frightening. It's one of those cases that really makes you kind of look at how somebody can seemingly have a pretty normal life,
Right.
and then just take this awful turn. What really struck me about this case was the contrast between his upbringing and then the horrible things that he ended up doing.
It really does make you think, what went wrong?
Yeah, Wade was adopted into a loving family.
Right.
They seemed to do well. He did well in school early on. But then around age 13, he just started exhibiting these really, really troubling behaviors.
Yeah.
Withdrawn, he was paranoid.
Right.
He was even disruptive. It's like a switch flipped, at that
Yeah.
point.
It's like a switch flipped. And it raises a really important question. Could things have been different if there had been early intervention? We know that his family tried to get him help, even resorting to the Baker Act,
Right.
which, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a Florida law that allows for involuntary commitment for mental health evaluation.
A safety net
Huh?
for people who might be a danger to themselves or others.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, Roe v. Wade just resisted any kind of help.
Well, he did.
And the resistance seems to have been like a recurring theme throughout his life.
Exactly. Fast forward to his adult life, you start to see a series of run-ins with the law,
Yeah.
theft,
Yeah.
assault, you name it. And what's fascinating about this is that his adoptive parents actually fought to have a lot of these charges dismissed.
Yeah, I can see, from a parent's perspective, wanting to protect your son,
Right.
but did that potentially create a sense of impunity? Did
Yeah.
that contribute to his escalating behavior later on?
It's a really tough question.
It is.
But we know for sure that during this time, Wade also became a father.
He did, yeah.
We don't know a lot of details about it, but you have to wonder how that new responsibility
Yeah.
may have impacted him, especially given his increasingly volatile behavior.
Yeah, I mean, adding fatherhood to an already volatile situation
Yeah.
is just like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in 2018, he met a woman named Kelly,
Right.
and that just added fuel to that fire.
Yeah, their relationship started out really positively, but it quickly devolved into a very classic example of an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And we see those classic warning signs. Drug
Mhm.
use, the arguments start to escalate, and then eventually it just turns to violence.
And it culminated in a really horrifying incident where he actually kidnapped Kelly,
He did.
forced her into the trunk of her own car, and then drove her all the way down to the Florida Keys.
To the Keys.
I mean, 3.5 hours in the trunk of a car. Can you imagine?
Yeah. This is where you really start to see the depths of his cruelty and his just complete disregard for human life. He beat her.
Yeah.
He sexually assaulted her.
He broke her foot,
He broke her foot, slamming the trunk on her.
and then at one point he even stops at a McDonald's drive-thru.
I know, with her in the trunk. Can you imagine?
With her in the trunk. I mean, just the callousness, right?
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. And, to make matters worse, when she eventually escaped and tried to press charges, the police just completely mishandled the investigation.
It's just a classic example of the system failing the victim.
It is.
They lost evidence.
Oh, yeah.
They dismissed her claims.
Yeah,
And ultimately, they allowed Wade to just walk free.
they did.
And sadly, that inaction would have very dire consequences because it allowed Wade's violence to escalate even further,
Absolutely.
which would lead to even more horrific crimes.
Right.
And that's what we're going to be taking a look at in the next part of our deep dive.
We're going to be looking at how Wade's crimes just completely spiraled out of control.
Yeah.
The victims he left in his wake. And the eventual capture of this very, very dangerous individual.
Stay with us. It's like giving him that pass for the crimes against Kelly,
Right.
it almost emboldened him.
Yeah.
It's terrifying to think about.
It is.
But it does seem like that's when things really escalated.
Yeah, and then by October of 2019,
Yeah.
Wade is just on this downward spiral.
Yeah.
Drugs, violence.
Yeah.
He was dating a woman named Melissa Montanus.
Right.
And their relationship was about to kind of become entangled in all of his really bad behavior.
It really does. This is where the story takes a turn and becomes this horrifying crime spree that left an entire community gripped by fear.
So on October 6th, Wade and Melissa go to a club called Buddha Life. And, Wade always, the life of the party,
Right.
hit it off with a guy named Jason Shepard.
Okay.
And Jason invited them back to his place. But Melissa was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
She didn't know Jason, didn't want to go.
Right.
And Wade, not one to take no for an answer,
Of course not.
stole her car
Yeah.
and took off to Jason's, leaving her completely stranded.
So while she's fuming about her stolen car,
Right.
Wade's off on this new adventure.
Yeah, he meets up with a woman named Christine Melton
Okay.
and her friend Stephanie Johnson,
Mm.
and he introduces himself to Stephanie as Junior.
Junior! It's weird.
I know, right? Clearly something's just not right.
It's like a little detail, but it says so much, you know. He's
Trying to
living in this
figure that out.
fantasy world. He's got these aliases. It's like he's completely detached from reality.
He is. So Wade and Christine had a history. They'd known each other before,
Okay.
and they ended up hooking up that night.
Okay.
The next morning, he tried to drive Christine and Stephanie back to Christine's house,
Right.
but he couldn't figure out how to drive Christine's stick shift because it was Melissa's car.
Well, Malika's car, right.
So they finally make it back to Christine's. Stephanie goes to take her kid to school,
Okay.
and then shortly after, Wade strangles Christine to death.
Wow. This is where you see the randomness and the brutality start to really come out. There's
Right.
just seemingly no motive,
Yeah.
no logical explanation for this sudden and violent act.
And then he steals her car, a black Nissan Versa, ditched Melissa's car because he was tired of fighting with the stick shift,
Oh, okay.
and then calls Melissa like nothing happened.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
I know, right?
I mean, she's furious, of course.
Of course, she's furious.
It's unbelievable that he would have the audacity to even call her.
Yeah, they had this big fight over the phone.
Yeah.
And then Wade decides he's going to pay her a visit at her work, downtown Fort Myers.
Mm-hmm.
He shows up in Christine's stolen Nissan, tries to get her in the car, and when she resisted, he attacked her.
He attacks her at work.
At work. Dragged her up the stairs,
Oh my God.
pinned her against a wall by her throat,
Oh, that's terrible.
and just beat her.
It's a truly disturbing scene, and it just really shows, I think, how far gone he was at this point.
He was. She luckily was able to escape when he punched her so hard that she started bleeding really badly.
Wow.
Seemed like that kind of snapped him out of his frenzy for a moment.
Right.
She was able to duck under his arm, lock herself in a room.
Right.
Wade took off in the Nissan, but the rampage wasn't over yet.
Oh, no.
He drives back to Cape Coral, sees this woman named Diane Ruiz walking to work.
Okay.
He pulls over, asks for directions,
Uh-huh.
and somehow convinces her to get in the car
Oh.
and then strangles her.
It's like, again, he's driven by this need to exert power and control.
Right.
And just inflict violence on anybody he comes across.
And he wasn't finished.
Yeah.
He then drives to an empty parking lot, throws Diane's body out of the car,
Oh, my God.
realizes she's still alive,
Oh, no.
and then runs her over multiple times with the car.
The level of brutality is just unimaginable.
It is. And we still don't know why he killed Diane.
Wow.
Some speculate it was a robbery,
Right.
but there's really no evidence to support that.
It's almost as if the killing was the motivation in and of itself.
Right.
Hmm.
It's a really terrifying thought.
It is.
And, despite all this, the police are on his trail for the attack on Melissa,
Right.
but they just keep missing opportunities to catch him.
Like, they can't catch a break.
They can't. They found him parked at a Joe's Crab Shack, but when they approached his car, he just drove away.
It's just another example of the system failing to protect its citizens.
It is.
They had him right there,
They did.
and they let him slip away.
Wade, now feeling the heat, breaks into a nearby house
Okay.
and calls his dad and confesses to being a killer.
Oh, wow. It's chilling to think about that phone call.
It is. He goes through and recounts the murders, describing how he strangled Christine, mentioning that rigor mortis set in,
Oh.
so he couldn't get her body in the train.
Oh, my goodness.
His dad said that Wade showed no remorse.
Wow.
He was even excited about the murders.
It's disturbing.
But his dad knew what he had to do.
Right.
He knew he had to call the police. And thankfully, they were closing in.
They were.
They had found Christine's body.
Right.
And after a really, really gruesome discovery at a parking lot near a Sam's Club,
Oh, no.
they were able to connect Wade to Diane's murder, too.
Okay.
So the evidence was piling up. Wade was apprehended,
Okay.
charged with 2 premeditated murders.
And the story doesn't end there, believe it or not.
You would think that being behind bars would be kind of the end of the story for Wade,
Right.
but it wasn't.
Oh,
He
okay.
actually attempted to escape from prison.
Are you serious? Like, it's almost like he's living in a movie.
I know.
Constantly trying to outsmart the system.
He and his cellmate cooked up this really elaborate plan.
Wow.
Even had a getaway car waiting.
It sounds like a Hollywood thriller.
It does.
But luckily, the deputies were tipped off and they were able to discover this escape attempt before it could be carried out.
They found that the cell window had been tampered with. The metal frame had been removed. There were several cracks in the security glass.
But get this, even if he had managed to get through the glass,
Right.
he wouldn't have been able to fit through the window.
I know. It's kind of comical in a way.
It is.
But it also shows his desperation, right?
Yeah.
That inability to accept the consequences.
That pattern of avoidance,
Yeah.
that detachment from reality, and it takes a pretty disturbing turn while he's in prison.
It does.
He ends up joining a white supremacist gang.
Yeah, the Unforgiven gets all these racist face tattoos, including the words, "Why so serious?" and "haha" around his eye.
Wow, so he's like embracing this persona.
Yeah, like a grotesque caricature.
Yeah. It's disturbing. It really raises a lot of questions about what's going on with him. You know, is this real? Is he actually buying into this?
Right.
Or is it just another attempt to kind of escape and create this persona to shield himself from what he's done?
Yeah, it's a question that's going to be debated for years to come.
It is.
But, ultimately, Wade's actions caught up with him.
They did.
His trial began in June of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And after hearing from a ton of witnesses,
Right.
the jury found him guilty on all 6 counts.
Wow.
First-degree murder, grand theft, battery, burglary, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. So 9 out of the 12 jurors recommended the death penalty,
They did.
which easily meets Florida's requirement of 8 out of 12 for that recommendation.
It does.
So it was pretty clear.
Yeah, a swift and decisive verdict,
It was.
a message that his crimes were not going to go unpunished.
Absolutely.
Sentencing was scheduled for August 27, 2024, but, as it often happens in these complex cases,
Right.
there were a lot of legal challenges that popped up.
Sure.
His attorneys were pushing for a new trial,
Yeah.
and there were some questions about the constitutionality of Florida's death penalty statute.
Right. It's a reminder that even when you get a verdict,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's over.
It doesn't.
The legal process can be very long and arduous.
And painful for the victims.
Absolutely. For the victims and their families, it just reopens these wounds that may never heal.
And, we also have to think about the impact on those that survived his attacks.
Right. We can't forget about them.
They can't.
Kelly, the woman he kidnapped and assaulted, has been bravely sharing her story.
She has.
She's been using platforms like TikTok to raise awareness about domestic violence and the failures of the justice system.
And we're going to make sure we include a link to her page in the description so you can hear her story directly from her.
Yeah, it's it's a reminder that justice isn't always served.
No, it's not.
And even when it is,
Yeah.
the scars, they can last a lifetime.
Yeah, it's a call to action for all of us to speak out,
It is.
to demand change, to demand a system that protects victims and holds abusers accountable.
This whole case, the case of Wade Stephen Wilson, the Deadpool killer,
Right.
it's a chilling reminder that evil can really hide in plain sight.
It can.
It forces us to confront these really uncomfortable questions about mental health, the cycle of abuse, and the systems that are supposed to protect us, but often fail.
Yeah. It's a story that's going to stay with you,
It is.
make you think about the complexities of human nature,
We will.
and remind you to be vigilant both in your own life and in your community.
Absolutely.
So what are your takeaways from this deep dive into the dark side? Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
And don't forget to subscribe to Case Closed
Yes.
for more explorations into the world of true crime.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
And stay safe.
Stay safe out there.